Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
Here at Fields & Brown Barbershop, legacy means a lot. We're trying to fill big shoes left by my two uncles and my grandfather, where every haircut came with conversation and every customer left a little taller than when they walked in. The barbershop is about pride. It's about knowing your barber knows your name and your story. Come see us at Fields & Brown Barbershop, where tradition never goes out of style. 3 generations, 1 legacy, your barbershop.
Arctic Air keeps your home or business comfortable. For more than 20 years, we provided outstanding residential and commercial services through southern Middle Tennessee. Whether you need assistance with your heat, air conditioning, preventive maintenance, or anything in between, trust our reliable team to get the job done. We'll take the time to figure out your specific needs and recommend what we believe is right and best for your situation.
We've been using Arctic Air for over 15 years now. Their service is great, they're here when we need them, and their prices are competitive. They take the worry out of the heat and air so I don't have to.
Arctic Air. When you need us, we'll be there.
Financial advisor Scott Beasley knows time spent with family is everything. As a founder of Beasley Wealth Management, his mission is to give clients the freedom to enjoy time with family without the burden of financial concerns. A local of Lawrenceburg, Scott deeply values building relationships with clients, ensuring they make informed decisions concerning asset management, tax planning, and retirement planning. Offering a free initial consultation, Beasley Wealth Management helps clients pursue their aspirations with confidence.
Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.
Alrighty, everybody, it is Friday, and that means it is prediction day. Welcome everybody into the Mark My Words College Sports Show here on the X Sports Network. I'm your host, Michael Marks, and it's Friday, and I just said it is prediction time. Not as many great games this weekend, but there are definitely some important ones, so we'll hop right into it. First off with the ACC, we got a game going on tonight in Blacksburg. The Cal Golden Bears taking their 5-2 record on the road to face off with the 2-5 Virginia Tech Hokies. Virginia Tech getting 5.5 points at home on the spread and over-under right at 50.5. Looking at last games, Cal did not look good last Friday. They had a game at home against the UNC and only took that one 21-18. And again, the Tar Heels have looked completely non-existent this entire season and have not looked good at all. And Cal is one of those teams that has struggled lately as well. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, coming off a bye week, a week before they lost to Georgia Tech, but did pick up back-to-back wins prior to that. So if you say any team has some bit of momentum right now, it would be the Hokies. It's at Blacksburg. It's at night. It's Friday night in the ACC, so you already know this one's going to be weird. And Cal has really struggled since the start of conference play, and maybe even a little bit before then. Taking a look at their schedule on the year, they have that win against Oregon State, which you didn't really know how bad Oregon State was at the time. Win over Texas Southern, a very good win over Minnesota in week 3. And then the next week, they get shut out by San Diego State 34-0. And then they struggle at Boston College, only winning 28-24. They get smacked around by Duke at home 45-21. And then you just barely take North Carolina. There's probably not going to be many times I'm going to comfortably take a 2-5 team to beat a 5-2 team, but give me the Hokies here. I don't know if it'll be a blowout or anything, but this has a 30-23 feel of it, maybe a 24-21, something like that. Because Cal's offense has really been struggling as of late, and Virginia Tech's defense isn't great, so there will be some points in this one, but I'm going to go with the Hokies. Going on to Saturday morning, this one on the CW. SMU at 5-2 going on the road to face the Wake Forest Demon Deacons at 4-2. SMU getting 3 points on the spread, over under a 54.5. SMU last week looked great. They played at Clemson and handled the Tigers. Clemson's still a very talented team. Not, obviously have not had a good season. 3-4, I believe, is their record right now, and have struggled at home a bit. But a win at Clemson is a win at Clemson. It doesn't matter if you're Troy or if you're LSU. It's still a valuable win. Wake Forest, on the other hand, took the beating to Oregon State 2 weeks ago. They've looked really good. Wake Forest has a really great pass defense that could put Kevin Jennings in some tough spots. Obviously, his receiver core is not as good this year as it was last year. So, for SMU, they're going to need to get the run game going. TJ Harden, I know Chris Johnson Jr. has been big for them over the past couple of weeks. You're the son of Chris Johnson, CJ2K, as everyone around here in Nashville, would know how great of a running back he has been. So I think that puts SMU in an interesting spot. Also, on the docket in this game, we don't know about Robbie Ashford. Right now, the matchup predictor has it 69-31 in favor of SMU. So, we know SMU's defense hasn't been good this year. They've had some shootouts, and it's the games they have lost. Funny enough, that have been the high-scoring ones. The lost to Baylor, lost to TCU. They've actually been winning more games scoring below 40 than they have going above 40. I don't think this one's going to be crazy high scoring, but I think a 35-24, similar to what they did to Clemson last week, is very likely because Wake's going to be trying to play Robbie Ashford. He's probable, as of right now. He struggled passing this year. I believe right now, up to this point in the year, I think it's 4 passing touchdowns and 4 interceptions, 2 passing touchdowns and 4 interceptions. So Ashford already not a great passing quarterback, has over 1,000 yards, but has done the bulk of his scoring on the ground. I think that's going to play into the favor of SMU. They're going to be trying to play with Wake Forest is going to be trying to play with a quarterback with a broken thumb that already has struggles throwing it. Maybe that fixes it. I don't know. So I think that's going to lead to some unforced errors, maybe a bad ball here or two. SMU, while I say their defense hasn't been great, the best way to get a stop is a turnover, a fumble, an interception. I also think the injured thumb's going to force Robbie Ashford to stay in the pocket a little bit more. So if Wake Forest is going to try to move the ball on the ground, it's going to be on Damon Claiborne. A great running back, almost 8 yards a carry on the year, 69 touches, 539 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He's been your big play guy on the ground. You're going to want a big game from him, but I'm going with SMU in this one. I like the Mustangs. They're still undefeated in conference play, and I think that will continue into next week. On to the Big 12. We'll start in the morning slot on TNT. We got the Sunflower Showdown. Kansas State at 3-4 going on the road to face the 4-3 Kansas Jayhawks. The spread's giving Kansas 3 points at home, over under a 56.5. Now, looking at these two teams' last games, they were struggles. Kansas State lost to TCU, coming off a bye. Kansas State lost to Texas Tech, also coming off a bye. Now, the interesting thing about this one is, the spread does have Kansas favored at home, but Kansas State's won 16 in a row, and 28 of the last 32 dating back to 1993. That was 10 years before I was even born, to put that in perspective with things. But I really do think that who wins this one comes down to one player. It's Dylan Edwards, the running back for Kansas State. Gets injured on a punt return in their first game of the season over in Ireland. Hasn't been able to, he's played some. I don't think he's put a full game together yet. And he's still, on that probable to questionable line for this week. So even if he does play, he won't be able to make too big of an impact, most likely. With him, I think that they can win this game. I think that Kansas's defense has struggled to stop the run. I think that was a big factor in Cincinnati beating Kansas earlier in the season. And I think, with him, they should win. But without him, they could lose to Kansas for the first time since 2008. But I think the red zone, funny enough, is going to play a big factor in this one. Kansas has been one of the worst red zone defenses in the country. I think 126 out of 127 teams. And Kansas State has been really efficient. I believe they're 14th, but Kansas's red zone defense is giving up giving up scores 95% of the time. That's 19 out of 20 trips. Contrary, Kansas State is scoring in the red zone at a 95% clip. I think that one's going to be important. If Kansas wants to win this one, they're going to have to keep Kansas State from getting to the red zone, because if they get there, you can go ahead and put some points on the board. I think Kansas gets it done, though. I like Jalen Daniels. I like their passing offense. And I think that they're going to be able to have some fun with Kansas State's rush defense. It has struggled this year. It's in the bottom 10 in the country. I think Jalen Daniels can be able to extend some plays with his legs. But I also think that Emmanuel Henderson could have a big game in this one, the transfer wide receiver from Alabama for Kansas. I think he could have a big game, but I think it's going to come down to LaShawn Williams. It has not been a great, or Daniel Henshaw. They've kind of been running a two quarterbacks or two running back set. Both around 5 yards a carry, but don't have a ton of carries through this point in the season. Neither one of them averaging 10 carries a game. I don't know how much that'll end up hurting them, but they're going to have to get the run game going if they want to take down Kansas. Kansas State had a chance last year. I think they get it done this year at home. We'll go over to the 2:30 slot on Fox. BYU, number 11, taking that 7-0 record on the road to Ames to take on the 5-2 Iowa State Cyclones. Iowa State's favored by 2.5, and it's a low over/under, which means this is going to be an ugly one. BYU last week had we could say it was a slobber knocker with Utah. They won 24-21. Iowa State, though, coming off a bye week. But funny enough, they lost to Colorado heading into that bye week. Probably, Colorado was probably handed that one, to be fair. But, these two teams, despite what they've come off of, feel like they're in two very different spots. BYU's beat up. They have been, I'm not going to say getting smacked around, but they've been bitten with the injury bug, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, which is where they have excelled this year. Iowa State's beat up kind of everywhere. But I think those injuries, most of them happened early enough in the year that they've kind of been able to redefine themselves since then. And I just think this game has upset. Despite Iowa State being favored in the spread, this one has upset written all over it. BYU, again, reeling from those injuries. Linebacker, secondary. So that favors Iowa State on both the run and pass game. And Iowa State, especially under Matt Campbell, and even before then, because they had that big upset win against Oklahoma State a couple years ago, back in 2011, Iowa State seems to always get you when they're down. And it's a program thing, because typically they're not great. History tells you Iowa State's not a good football program. But they have a ton of upset wins. This is at home in front of their crowd. I know they have a great environment there. And these are two really talented defenses with very inconsistent offenses. And I think a field goal could win this one. I think a field goal could be the difference. And, if I'm picking between kickers, give me Iowa State. And Kyle Conradi already hit a 63-yarder this year against South Dakota. And he hit a 54-yarder to beat Iowa. So, he's got the stones, so to speak, to hit a big field goal. I'm going to take Iowa State in the upset. Baylor and Cincinnati, this one at 3 o'clock on ESPN2. And funny enough about this game, I think it's going to be our high-scoring game that I predicted a week ago. Obviously, TCU and Baylor, TCU's defense was too good in that one to allow Baylor to put up a lot of points, but Cincinnati's defense isn't great. They don't give up a ton of points, but they give up a lot of yards, and I think Baylor will be able to hit enough big plays in this one. Cincinnati's favored by 3.5. Over/under set at 66.5. I think the over has a really good chance of hitting on that one. Again, Baylor coming off that loss to TCU the week before, 42-36, a game where Sawyer Robertson threw 3 fourth-quarter interceptions. And Cincinnati coming off laying down the butt whooping on Oklahoma State. That one 49-17 last weekend. Both teams give up a lot of yards. Both teams' defenses aren't very good. Cincinnati isn't as big on points. They've been able to force some turnovers that have been big this year. I think that Cincinnati on the ground will be able to control this one. They're still one of the best rushing offenses in the country. Brendan Sorsby has been a really good quarterback, running the ball and throwing the ball. I think that gives you a bit of a boost, because Baylor hasn't been able to run the ball this year. I'll just kind of say it how it is. They're 4-3. They've only ran the ball for about 900 yards this season. Now, they've thrown for almost 2,500, so, their pass game has been awesome. Josh Cameron, Michael Trigg, Ashton Hawkins, those guys are really good. But you look at Cincinnati. They have 4 guys that have combined for 1,100 yards. Evan Pryor, Walker, and Brendan Sorsby. And those guys have 11 rushing touchdowns. That allows them to control the tempo on the ground, but through the air, Sorsby, not the greatest completion percentage, about 1,700 yards, 66% completion percentage, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception, has been sacked twice. Interceptions and sacks are big plays that can completely derail, not necessarily games, but drives. Definitely interceptions. Sack have a good chance of it. And those are just things that that Cincinnati doesn't do. I like Cincinnati in this one, but it really does have a feel of a 41-34 possibly, maybe a 45-38, something like that. There are going to be a lot of points in this one. It should be a fun one to watch in that mid-afternoon slot. But give me the Bearcats. Houston 6-1 going on the road to face off with Arizona State. That one at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. Hey, Arizona State's favored by 7. So the spread loves them. Over-under at 45.5. This is going to be a defensive one. Houston last week against Arizona was able to get a win 31-28. Arizona State last week and was able to take down Texas Tech 26-22. Those are two very different wins. That was Houston struggling at home with an Arizona team that has been wildly inconsistent. And that was an Arizona State team coming off their worst loss of the year and beating the best team in their conference. It's at Arizona State. Houston has not played good on the road. Houston has not played good against ranked opponents. Their pace of play is slow, so they'll try to keep it, keep that play style of slow running the ball, short passes, but I think that play style favors Arizona State more than them. Arizona State has a really good defense, a really stout defense that will try to take away the run. They know Connor Wigman isn't going to be a huge threat through the air, so I think that this one favors Arizona State big time. Both teams run the ball really well. The difference in this one will be quarterback play. I think Sam Levitt is a much better quarterback than Connor Wigman. Give me Arizona State a big win here. I'll hop on over to the Big Ten where we have a really interesting matchup. I mean, this is probably for a spot in the Music City Bowl, if we're being too honest with it. But we have 5-2 Northwestern going to Nebraska to face off with the 5-2 Cornhuskers. That one at 11 a.m. on FS1. Nebraska's favoring the spread by 7.5 and over under a 44.5. So again, this one tells you defense will be a big one. Northwestern last week looked really good. They took down Purdue 19-0. Nebraska last Friday against Minnesota looked terrible. Lost 24-6. Raiola got sacked 9 times. You couldn't run the ball. Nebraska has really struggled this season playing the sluggish style of football. Their 2 losses, Michigan and Minnesota. Those are punch-in-the-mouth kind of teams. And their offensive line has struggled in those games as well. Raiola did not look great against Michigan, was running for his life for most of the time, and didn't have time to run for his life against Minnesota, got sacked 9 times. And it's not that their O-line has struggled just in pass blocking. It's like, we'll just run the ball. They've struggled run blocking against those teams as well. Emmett Johnson didn't play good in either of those games. Their offensive line has struggled. Northwestern's offense is not good. Bottom of the Big Ten, and lower half at least in most offensive categories. Their defense has been stifling all season, minus that Tulane game in Week 1. They have a top 20 pass defense. They have a top 15 in total defense, so that's scoring and yards. I think if they score 20 points, that'll be enough to win this one. I really do. Nebraska has really struggled as of late. Raiola needs a big game. I got Northwestern in this one, though. How about that? Northwestern is 6-2. They better be ranked next week if that's the case. This is a weird one. 3-4 UCLA at number 2 Indiana, 7-0. This one 11 a.m. on Fox, the big noon kickoff. Indiana's favored by 25.5. Now these lines are as of yesterday when I put this together. Over under a 54.5. UCLA last week got the win against Maryland 20-17. Wasn't pretty, but they got it done. Nico went down in that game. He was able to return and lead that game-winning drive for UCLA. Kind of curious how close to 100% he is. I assume he would play. I haven't heard anything through the week that would suggest otherwise. Indiana last week took down Michigan State 38-13. So these teams do have a common opponent, that being Michigan State. Funny enough, UCLA went to East Lansing and handled Michigan State by a score of 38-13. I'm not saying UCLA is going to win this game or anything, but if they do, I might tell you I told you so on Monday. But in my mind, I got people telling me 2 different things. we can say a devil and an angel on my shoulder right there. One of them's telling me UCLA could do this. They run the ball, this, that, and the other. They beat Michigan State just as bad as Indiana did. And I'm pretty sure Indiana did that at home. They did. UCLA did that on the road. But this game has USF Miami feeling for it to me from earlier in this season. It was a game that we knew that Miami was going to win by 20 points, but all week we kept telling ourselves that maybe USF could do it. I will say that UCLA's run game has been awesome since Tim Skipper took over and Jerry Neuheisel took over play calling. It's crazy how firing a team's head coach, with Deshaun Foster and Tino Sunseri leaving the program, their offensive play caller and their OC, it's funny how much better they've gotten. They have an identity. They look like they're having fun out there. After week 3, I said that team did not look like they wanted to take the field again. And funny enough, Penn State completely changed that for them. UCLA's run game has been good. It's allowed them to control the clock against these teams. And look, this play style gave Indiana fits a few weeks ago against Iowa. But I will say that I think Indiana has a better chance of winning by 40 plus than UCLA does of winning. I'm going to go Indiana with my pick, but I've seen crazier things this year. Illinois going on the road to Seattle to face off with Washington. Both teams 5-2. This one at 2:30 on the Big Ten Network. Man, this one feels like it should be televised on a bigger network than that. I mean, we have another team, a collection of 5-2 teams playing on CBS. I feel like we should probably switch to CBS and Big Ten Network games in those slots, but I don't schedule TV. I don't make the TV schedules. Washington is favored by 4, an over/under of 54.5. Look at these teams' last games. Illinois coming off a bye week, lost 34-16 to Ohio State. Washington last week got punched in the mouth at the Big House by Michigan, 24-7. Washington isn't tough. They're just not Big Ten tough. They could run over Illinois on Saturday, and I would probably still be preaching it. Because they aren't. The only time they've played tough and physical Big Ten teams, which is Ohio State and Michigan, funny enough, they've struggled mightily. They haven't been able to run the ball. Their front seven was getting pushed around. And honestly, it felt like both of those teams were kind of playing with their food, so to speak. Michigan and Ohio State knew they didn't have to do too much more. If you look at Washington's other games, Colorado State, UC Davis, Washington State, Maryland, and Rutgers. None of those teams scare me with their physicality. But then you look, they've scored 6 against Washington or against Ohio State. That one at home, and then went on the road, scored 7 at Michigan. I think they'll score more than 6. They'll score more than 7. They'll probably score somewhere in the 14 to 17 range. But Illinois is a big physical team. Brett Bielema will tell you that firsthand. I think this benefits them defensively, Illinois, stopping the run with Jonah Coleman. There are some linemen dealing with some injuries for Washington, so they're not going to be at 100% up front. And despite me talking about big physical teams, Illinois is a pass-first team. This season they are very efficient at it, 73% completion percentage for Luke Altmaier, only 1 interception. And Washington's pass defense is bottom 10 in the country. And so look for Will Beatty to have a big game. I know Takario Davis is a very good defensive back for Washington, but I just think that Illinois has a little too much on offense. I'm going to take Illinois outright. It feels crazy to pick a ranked team as an underdog, but Illinois is that. Now, this is not a game I'm going to watch. I'm not, but it is probably my favorite game of the weekend that I won't watch. Minnesota at 5-2 going on the road to face off at Iowa, who is also 5-2. Both of these teams unranked. Both of these teams sluggish. The spread's given Iowa 8.5. I don't know if they'll get to that. Over under at 38.5. So we're getting a sluggish game. Minnesota's last game, obviously that game last Friday where they absolutely just beat up Nebraska up front. Iowa's last game against Penn State, they had that comeback victory last Saturday. This is the tough guy game. This is the who wants it more game because it's going to be ugly. It's going to be sluggish, and it's what Big Ten football is at its heart. They're not slinging it around the yard. These teams are going to be running it right up the middle probably 50 times each. And, maybe they break out a play action every once in a while. They get a 12-yard chunk to get them in the field goal range. Iowa's looked much better as the year has gone on. They have 2 losses. They have come to Iowa State, who is still a pretty dang good team. And that was on the road when Iowa State was about as high as they could be, momentum-wise, coming off of that game at Ireland and that win against South Dakota. Then you have Minnesota. Or the other team Iowa lost to, Indiana. One of the top 2 teams in the country. Possibly. I mean, they're number 2 right now. I don't know really how good they are, but Iowa's pace completely, slowed Indiana down to a halt. I think they'll be able to do that to Minnesota. Iowa has won 9 of the last 10, and the one they didn't win, Minnesota was gifted that one in 2023. It was the punt return from Cooper DeJean that did or did not happen. They say maybe he waved a hand up to call for a fair catch. At least that's what the officials say. Replay would tell you he was waving a guy to get out of the way, or running up to go catch the ball. So I like Iowa in this one. I think they're just a bit bigger and a bit more physical up front. I think Mark Gronowski is going to have another good game. And a good game for Mark Gronowski is not 300 yards passing and 4 touchdowns. He doesn't have a passing touchdown since September 13th. That was week 3 when they played UMass. But Iowa has scored 30 points twice since then without a passing touchdown. Not saying they're going to score it this weekend. But it's going to come down to Mark Gronowski and Kamari Moulton. Moulton, 360 rushing yards on the season. Is getting about 5.5 yards a carry. Mark Gronowski getting about 5 yards a carry as well. That's 12 rushing touchdowns right there. So it's going to become a lot on the ground. Iowa's not going to score a lot. I think this has got 17-14 written all over it, maybe 17-13. There will probably be a safety in this game. There will probably be a missed 2-point conversion in this game. It's just going to be a crazy game, and I like Iowa. Hopping over to the big boy conference of the SEC, we got Ole Miss 6-1 going on the road to face off with number 13, and also 6-1 Oklahoma. This is the 11 a.m. game on ABC. Oklahoma favored by 5.5 points. So Vegas likes the Sooners, and I think I do a little bit. Over under at 53.5. Ole Miss's last game, they blew it against Georgia, another team that has had a chance to beat Georgia. Georgia should be 3-4 right now, and they're 6-1. Because they know how to win games. Tennessee should have beaten them. Auburn should have beaten them. Ole Miss should have beaten them. But they didn't. Oklahoma, on the other hand, had a sluggish win, but a win nonetheless, 26-7 at South Carolina. These are very different defenses. Ole Miss is coming off another bad performance. I think that we overvalued them after that LSU game. And Oklahoma's coming off one of their better defensive performances against South Carolina. I think facing Lenore Sellers last week will help OU's defense against Trinidad Chambliss. He is a much better passer, but I think that rushing threat from the quarterback, they'll be ready for that. And Ole Miss's defense let Georgia run it right down their throats really the entire second half and honestly most of the game. And Oklahoma finally looked good running the ball last week. Can they compound that? If they can, give me the Sooners. Auburn at Arkansas. This at 11:45 on the SEC network. Arkansas favored by 1.5. Over under set at 55.5. Auburn last week at home against Missouri blew it in overtime. Shocker, 23-17. Arkansas, on the other hand, at home against A&M, looked really good. Didn't have enough to get it done. 45-42 there. I think Auburn is in full dumpster fire mode. If they don't win here, Hugh Freeze will be looking for a new job on Sunday morning, maybe Saturday night. This is an early game, so if it gets bad, they could probably ship him out pretty quick. Arkansas has one of the best offenses in the country, and you can't doubt it. They are putting up 7.5 yards of play still to this point in the season, and those teams win national championships and have Heisman Trophy winners. This won't have either because they have zero defense. But if you look, we have a comparable opponent. Texas A&M. Auburn scored 10. Arkansas scored 42. 7 of those 10 that Auburn scored were, I don't remember if they ruled it a pick or a fumble, but what it was, their defense got them to the 2-yard line. So Auburn could not score on A&M's defense, and Taylor Green tore them apart. I think Arkansas wins this one by 2 or 3 scores. I think that we could seriously be looking up, and it's 45-13, 34-17. I mean, it's going to be a blowout. And I think Auburn's going to be looking for a new football coach on Sunday. The college game day game of the week in week 9 of college football is number 15, 6-1 Missouri at number 10, 6-1 Vanderbilt. Now, a lot of people wanted them to go to South Dakota State, North Dakota State, and because, they're at the SEC every week. Well, the SEC is the only conference in the country that has had a ranked and ranked matchup every week. No Big Ten, no Big 12, no ACC. And also they're saying they go into the SEC teams every week. Why would they not pick this FCS game that's 1 versus 2? Well, they were in South Dakota State for this game 3 years ago, or I think they may have even been further back. That time Pat McAfee showed up with a sleeveless hoodie in North Dakota in November. that was like 2018, 2017. So they've been there recently. They haven't been to Vanderbilt since 2008. This is the best Vanderbilt team since then. Hopefully for Vandy's sake, they can finish this season much better than they finished that one. Both of these teams got a ton of momentum. Their one losses are both to Alabama. Vandy's was on the road. Missouri's was at home. But I just feel like there's no reason Vanderbilt should lose this game. Vandy is undefeated at home. They've looked better there all season. They do have some good road wins, but I think they've looked more comfortable at home all around. Missouri played their first road game of the season last week. They did not look good. I think if they were playing any other team in the SEC except maybe Kentucky and South Carolina, they would have lost that game. Plain and simple. I think Vandy will need to sell out against the run to stop Ahmad Hardy. And if you force Perbula to be a passer, which he is not, it'll yield good things for your defense and in return your offense. Because we saw Perbula, trying to throw the ball a lot against Alabama. He threw 2 picks and kind of sold them the game. So I'm going to go with Vanderbilt here, getting a comfortable win at home against Missouri. They're going to go to 7-1 and be comfortably inside the top 10 on Sunday. That's just crazy. Number 22, Texas, going on the road to face off with Mississippi State and Starkville. That one at 3:15 on the SEC Network. Texas is favored by 7, over under at 44.5. So they're thinking low-scoring game. I'm kind of on the same page. Texas last week went on the road to Kentucky, went to the grocery store field at Kroger Field, and looked terrible. They got, I don't know the exact stats. I'm going to try to pull them up, actually. Because it is baffling. If you look at the box score without the score, you would have thought Texas got mauled 60-0, and it was 16-13 they won. Kentucky had more third downs at a better rate, more fourth downs, had over twice as many yards, had twice as many passing yards, a much better completion percentage. Kentucky did have an interception, outrushed them by 90 yards on the ground, had twice as many yards per carry, had almost 4 times as many yards. Penalties, they had way less penalties. They had the one more turnover, and they controlled the ball they had the ball for almost 40 minutes of that game, and they lost. Mississippi State, on the other hand, had the collapse of all collapses last week. Had the ball at the 29-yard line, in field goal range, under a minute, and you threw a pick to a defensive lineman. Now, Mississippi State head coach Jeff Lebby, if you remember where he came from before he was at Mississippi State, he was the offensive coordinator for Oklahoma for a couple of years. So I don't think he needs any extra motivation to beat Texas. And Mississippi State's still winless in their conference, but if you look at their games, they had the conference opener at home against Tennessee. Struggled a little bit, gave up 2 defensive touchdowns. Okay, you go on the road at A&M. That's not going to go well. You go on the road again last week to the Swamp. Had a chance to go well, but it didn't. I think they're back in front of the Cowbells, and I think that's going to be a huge factor considering that Arch Manning, not good. They could get C.J. Baxter back, but Wisner hasn't been running the ball good, and that was a 1,000-yard rusher the year before. I don't think just throwing another guy out there to get 2 yards of carry is going to help you much. I think I'm finally done waiting on Texas to get good, to hit their stride, to find their groove. It's week 9. If you don't have it yet, if you don't have your groove, you're not in stride, then I think that this is what your offense is, and it's not good. It's been bad all year. It had enough. Their defense won them the game against Oklahoma, but since then they've looked terrible. I get they're 5-2 and have they don't really have a good win. I guess you could say Oklahoma, but how good were they with an injured quarterback? I think if Mississippi State scores more than 30, they will win this game comfortably because Texas hasn't scored more than 30 against the team that wasn't Sam Houston or San Jose State. I'm going to go with Mississippi State with the upset on this one. Number 3, Texas A&M at number 20, LSU. This one at 6:30 on ABC. Texas A&M favored by 2.5 on the road, which means Vegas would give them about 10 at home. An over-under at 48.5. Texas A&M scraped by Arkansas last week. Their defense did not look good. LSU last week lost to Vanderbilt. Now, that doesn't have the same connotation. I think Vanderbilt's a much better team than Arkansas, so I think LSU had a much tougher test. One team loses by 3, one team wins by 3. Home team's won the last 8 in this series. And it always feels like the team that has no business winning this game always wins it. except maybe in 2019 when A&M got routed by Joe Burrow. But you look at 2022, 2023, it always, even last year, if Texas A&M should not have won this game last year, and Marcel Reed came in and tore them apart. So, that has me leaning towards the Tigers. Texas A&M, despite being 7-0, has been wildly inconsistent this year. They have not had both sides of the ball show up to a game yet. You can. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, they can play a slugfest, so they can play a shootout." That shows a good team because they can play multiple styles. And I just think that says that one side of the ball isn't showing up on Saturday, and it's happened all season, except maybe Florida, and that's a maybe. And I say if it's the defense that stays home, watch out. Because I think LSU's offense showed some improvements slightly against Vanderbilt. I think they ran the ball pretty well. I think Nussmeier got a little more comfortable in the pocket despite being thrown around, it seems like. But there were moments when you're like, okay, we hadn't seen that this year from LSU. And as long as they're continuing to get healthier, I think they're going to be a better team. And I think they build on what they did at Vanderbilt. I think LSU's defense can cause some problems, but Marcel Reed's really good when plays break down. He tore LSU's defense apart last year by himself, it felt like. But it's at Death Valley. It's at night. Brian Kelly's 20-1 in those games. It feels crazy that he's already had 21 night games at LSU since he's been there. But I could go into a rant about LSU only getting night games at home for forever. I mean, look at the last time they played a game at 11 a.m. local time. Didn't go too well for them. And those A&M stars, the KC Concepcion, the Mario Cravers, I could say Marcel Reed, but none of them have played in that environment yet. When they were running wild on broken plays last year, Reed, not necessarily Concepcion, he was back at NC State then. They looked good. They looked good breaking down plays at home, but they're not going to be able to do it on the road. I got LSU. They have no business winning this game, and I think they will. I will look stupid on Monday when I come in for the show and Texas A&M wins by 3 touchdowns. But right now I think LSU is fighting for their season. They're fighting for their coach to keep his job. Well, Brian Kelly is. I don't know if the fans are. I like LSU. They're good as a desperate team. And Brian Kelly has been a good coach typically when it's come to desperation moments like this in the middle of the season. Number 17, Tennessee, going on the road to face off with Kentucky in Lexington. This one at 6:45 on the SEC Network. Spread's giving Tennessee 8.5, over under at 54.5. Look at these teams. Coming off of what they did last week, momentums are completely flipped. Tennessee got smacked at Alabama, 37-20. The score, I think the score feels a lot different than it actually felt. Kentucky lost to Texas last week, 16-13. And Kentucky looked really good and lost. Tennessee looked really bad and lost. And I'll say it, Kentucky looked the best they've looked all season. I know you could say they looked pretty good against Ole Miss, but I think that this was their most complete game, despite not getting in the end zone more than once. But did they burn all their fuel before the finish line? Seth McGowan is questionable on the week, questionable this week. That's 500 yards and 7 touchdowns this year. That is a lot of Kentucky's offensive production right there. And I think Tennessee's defense looked much better against Alabama than they had all season. I know they still gave up 37 points, but take away the 6 the defense gave them and the 2 that the safety caused. I mean, that's a Alabama team that scored 28 points. I think most Tennessee fans would be happy with that. And I think most of Alabama's big plays last week came from Alabama's receivers and players making plays. Ty Simpson making plays. That the Xavion Brown with the pick 6, that was making a play. Yonze Pierre, those 3 sacks, that's making a play. I think that was more than Tennessee just making a mistake. Kentucky's defense is not very good. They're bottom half of the conference in most defensive statistics. And I think just for the university's sake, Tennessee needs a win. I mean, you got your baseball coach left for a pro job. You got people attacking your women's basketball coach and your athletic director, calling for their heads. Some people are getting fed up with Josh Heupel losing to Alabama on the road. And I think a 55-14 win would settle some nerves. I mean, we got people in the Knoxville News Sentinel writing, editorial pieces on why Tennessee should go away from Rocky Top because it incites violence against government officials. I'm not making that up. That's not the exact headline, but that is a real thing. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick, actually, because it is crazy. Just the whole idea of that. I don't know if I can see if I can pull this up real quick. Of course, the people I look at to find something don't have anything posted about it. Yeah, nothing there. I'll check one more guy before we get back to it, because I'm 99% sure this guy said something about it. Opinion. Recent attacks on federal officers should lead the University of Tennessee to stop fanning the flames of violence with the song Rocky Top. We'll talk about that one on Monday if it's still making its rounds. But yeah, I'm going with Tennessee in this one. I think they need a big win. I think they get a big win. I think Kentucky's going to be a bit down after last week. I think Tennessee, try to find some good things against Alabama, and it's Kentucky. Tennessee has fared well against Kentucky, and the last time that they lost to Kentucky at night was 2017. It's been a while. Before that, it was, God knows how long. It feels like, they lost to them in 2011, but you're looking at the two worst Tennessee teams of all time. I don't think this falls into that category. We'll look outside the Power 5. USF at Memphis. This one at 11 a.m. on ESPN2. South Florida's given 4.5 and a spread of 59 and an over/under of 59.5. South Florida's last game, they got a big win over FAU, 48-13, and Memphis lost to UAB, 31-24. Now, I think Memphis, looking at them this season, I think they might need to make a quarterback change. Now, this Memphis team has a win over Arkansas. This Memphis team has, good wins over, Troy. I think that Troy win was big. But you look at what they did last week at UAB. Brendan Lewis didn't play much. A.J. Hill was your quarterback in that game. Tried to lead you back in. UAB went with a different quarterback. No Kitna in that one. I think you need to go A.J. Hill at quarterback. I think Brendan Lewis has been a bit of a turnover problem this year. 15 total touchdowns to 4 interceptions, 7 on the ground, 8 through the air isn't bad, but I feel like you need to switch something up because those turnovers will cost you in this game. And USF, on the other hand, boy, have they... that Miami game was bad, and I don't want to take anything away from it because they lost that game 49-12. That's a 37-point loss. Since then, 63-14, 54-26, 63-36, 48-13. I don't know if they'll run through Memphis, but I think they win by double digits. Maybe even 3 scores, a 17-point win, something like that. But I think USF will win this one big, and will pretty much be locked in for the Group of 5 spot in the playoff. But, big but, if Memphis can get this win, I think they're right back in it. They still only have 1 loss, and you look, they have South Florida, Tulane, East Carolina, and Navy all still on their schedule. They'll have a chance to earn it. We'll head out to the Mountain West. This one at 2:30 on FS1. San Diego State at 5-1, going on the road to face Fresno State 5-2. Spread's got San Diego State by 3 points. We've seen them beat power conference teams this year. They beat Cal, a team we talked about earlier, 34-0. Fresno State, on the other hand, is coming off of a confusing game, is probably the best way to put it, because they played a team with 1 win last week, a 1-4 Colorado State team, and they got smoked. It was 35-14 at halftime. That game was over before it got started. And E.J. Warner's kind of struggled this year. As the senior quarterback, son of Kurt Warner, 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Completion percentage right around 68%. And he had turnover problems his whole college career. He's a senior this year, 12 his freshman year, 12 his sophomore year, 13 his junior year at Temple and Rice respectively, and has not done much better at Fresno. I think that he'll struggle again. That San Diego State defense will get some big stops and will lead them to a big win. Give me San Diego State. And now, for the first time in history, we are talking about an FCS game on this show. Number 1, North Dakota State. Number 2, South Dakota State. This is for everything. This is for number 1 in the country. This is for number 1 in the Missouri Valley. Because, of course, North Dakota State and South Dakota State are in the Missouri Valley Conference. Nonetheless, spread's got North Dakota State favored by 4.5 and over-under at 47.5. This one at 7 on ESPNU. So definitely watch this one. It's going to be a great game. If LSU and Texas A&M get a little boring, or Tennessee, Kentucky is a blowout, I'd definitely put this one on a second screen, because I think it's a great game, and I think more people should watch these two teams, because I mean it's great football. South Dakota State's rushing attack has been a bit inconsistent this year. They've had good games, they've had bad games. I think you combine that with North Dakota State's run defense. It's given up about 2.5, 2 2/3 yards per carry. I think that's going to force South Dakota State to be a one-dimensional team. I think that's going to force some mistakes. So I like North Dakota State in this one. Now, talking about these two teams, it's really funny because you look at Trey Lance. You remember him at North Dakota State. Well, Trey Lance has got a little brother. And Trey Lance's little brother is a wide receiver for this North Dakota State team on the year. Bryce Lancey's a senior out of Marshall, Minnesota. 26 catches, 535 yards, and 4 touchdowns, an average of 20.6 yards per catch. He's 6'3", big athletic receiver. Definitely a guy to keep your eyes on. Maybe as we edge towards closer towards the NFL draft. So real quick, we'll go back over the picks. I got Virginia Tech over Cal, SMU over Wake, Kansas over Kansas State, Iowa State over BYU, Cincinnati over Baylor, Arizona State over Houston, Northwestern over Nebraska, Indiana over UCLA, Illinois over Washington, Iowa over Minnesota, Oklahoma over Ole Miss, Arkansas over Auburn, Vanderbilt over Missouri, Mississippi State over Texas, LSU over A&M, and Tennessee over Kentucky. In the group of 5, I have USF over Memphis and San Diego State over Fresno State. And in the FCS, I have North Dakota State over South Dakota State. Best games to watch in each time slot. It's kind of tough because I don't want to just say the SEC games. I'd say keep a light eye on UCLA, Indiana, because I think that one has a chance to get weird. But Ole Miss, Oklahoma looks like that game to watch in the morning slot. In the middle of the day, I'll probably have my eyes on probably BYU, Iowa State. I think that's going to be a good one. Also sort of in that midday slot, Baylor and Cincinnati. But you could also watch Missouri Vanderbilt. That game should be on in most households. And in the night slot, I'm going to be watching Tennessee, Kentucky, but Texas A&M, LSU, and North Dakota State, South Dakota State should be good ones. Also keep an eye on USF, Memphis in that morning slot as well. And that will do it for the Friday edition of the Mark My Words College Sports Show. We will be back on Monday to break down all these games, and if there's any crazier ones, we'll throw them in there as well. So for Michael Marks, you've been watching the X Sports Network. Have a good weekend, everybody.
Going the distance with local sports. This is the X Sports Network.